Very interesting journey. I learned a lot about COVID. I learned it by really going to school. This is the real school. This isn't the let's read the book school. And I get it and I understand it. And it's a very interesting thing. And I'm going to be letting you know about it.
Meanwhile, the president's doctors continue to paint a positive picture about his health. But who really knows the truth? This morning, the lead doctor treating Mr. Trump admitted he misled the public about the severity of his condition over the weekend. And that on at least 2 occasions, President Trump's oxygen levels have been cause for concern. But at the same time, Dr. Sean Conley says the president could be discharged as early as tonight. CNN's Jeremy Diamond has this update.
Look at the situation we're in right now. The President of the United States, a 74-year-old man who's in a high-risk category, is in the hospital with an infectious disease that has killed more than 209,000 people in the United States in just the last 7 months. And the doctor who is not only treating him but briefing the public on his condition is facing a credibility crisis. And that is because of the changes in the statements, the withholding of information that we have seen from Dr. Sean Conley. Yesterday we heard Dr. Sean Conley dance around these questions about the president's oxygen, whether or not he had received supplemental oxygen. And then today we saw him finally admit, after the press had reported this, that yes, indeed, the president had received supplemental oxygen on Friday and most likely as well yesterday during the day on Saturday as well. While we heard more information from Dr. Conley today, he revealed that the president had a worryingly high fever on Friday, that his oxygen levels had dipped below 94% twice now. Dr. Sean Conley also defended this optimistic assessment that he offered of the president's condition just yesterday. Listen.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, that his course of illness has had. Didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true, so here I have it. He is the fact of the matter is that he's doing really well.
Dr. Sean Conley there. Meanwhile, the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence is still scheduled for Thursday. Mr. Pence tested negative for COVID-19 again this morning. CNN's MJ Lee has more.
As President Trump gets treatment for COVID-19 at Walter Reed, the Biden campaign is continuing with its normal campaign activities. And as you say, next week, the big event to watch is this vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris. This is going to be the first time that the two candidates face off on the debate stage. And what CNN can report is that there were concerns raised by the Biden campaign to the Presidential Debate Commission about the spacing between the two candidates, and there were ongoing discussions and negotiations. And essentially what the Biden campaign said was that the 7 feet that Pence and Harris were initially supposed to be apart, seated to do this debate next week, that just was not enough space. And so what they ultimately decided is that now they will be seated 12 feet apart instead of the 7 feet. I should note 12 feet, that's about the same distance that President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, that's how far apart they were standing at their first debate. So clearly, even though the Vice President, Mike Pence, has been tested now multiple times and has tested negative, including earlier today, it is clear the fact that he's somebody with close proximity to both the president and others at the White House, that has raised some concerns with the Biden campaign.
That was CNN's MJ Lee. Leaders in Paris and New Caledonia are pondering what's next for the territory after voters in a second referendum narrowly rejected independence and chose instead to stay with France. Under the Nouméa Accord, just a third of New Caledonia's Congress is needed to call for a third and final referendum to be held within 2 years. The French President Emmanuel Macron addressed New Caledonians late last night and called on each side to imagine their future with the other in mind. Well, RNZ Pacific's Walter Zweifel has been following the debate. He joins me now in the studio. Walter, with this success for the pro-French loyalist parties, they're not going to want a third referendum, are they?
No, basically no. Their argument is that it is now clear that the majority wants to keep its current ties with France. Significantly, though, polls in 2018 predicted 70% no votes. It came as a shock then when on just 56% voted no. That number has now dropped to 53%. They, however, think that with an 85% turnout, as we saw yesterday, the exact strength of each side is now known and little will change. They, however, challenge the pro-independence side to accept this outcome of this democratic process.
What about the pro-independence side? They've lost here, but narrowly. Does it think it'll be able to get a majority support next time?
Of course, they would like to get a victory, but even before the final results were known last night, its leaders were adamant that they want to follow the letter of the Noumea Accord and have a third vote. Important here is the perspective. For the Kanak leaders, these referendums are part of a decolonisation process started after the troubles of the 1980s. New Caledonia was then inscribed on the UN decolonisation list in 1986, and the Kanak leaders feel that they have gone through these motions with these accords, which has to end with independence. Their stance is that if they cannot get control of their country through this Noumea Accord process, they will want bilateral talks with Paris on the way forward.
Surely there's no room for any compromise.
Well, time will tell. The referendum question didn't allow for nuances. With a simple yes or no, it was confrontational. In practice, however, there are issues that lend themselves for discussion. There are also calls to be more nationalistic, to build an inclusive New Caledonian identity. Questions that need to be considered are, for example, would an independent New Caledonia create its own armed forces? Could it assume a relationship with France akin to the ties between, for example, the Cook Islands and New Zealand? The idea of an associated state has been mooted, and even a two-nation federation. What can be expected, though, is a flurry of activity in the next little while and a re-engagement by France in this process.
Thanks, Walter. That was Walter Zweifel of RNZ Pacific talking about New Caledonia. Now, today is Monday, which means overnight or Sunday in Belarus, tens of thousands of people have again taken to the streets of the capital Minsk to call for President Alexander Lukashenko to step down following August's rigged election. They've been demonstrating for 8 Sundays in a row now. Today, police used water cannons to disperse protesters, while dozens were arrested. And that, in part, was what today's march was about, to call for the release of all of those detained. Natalia Denisova is a lawyer in Minsk. She's been arrested twice for demonstrating. Her trial is next week. She's currently on bail and spoke to the BBC about her most recent arrests.
We were blocked by special police guys in this scary black uniform. They dragged us into a truck and brought us to the police station. In the truck, they put so many people, we can only stand there very close to each other. We cannot breathe, and some people fainted, so it was a kind of a torture. I don't know why this cruelty is really needed, maybe just to scare people. We were arrested together with my husband. Since both parents were arrested together, they were hesitating, but still they decided to let me out, to release me until the trial.
That was Natalia Denisova speaking in Minsk. The strangest London marathon in the race's 40-year history has been run, with athletes cheered on by cardboard cutouts that included the Queen. Only elite runners were allowed to compete, but about 45,000 people in 109 different countries ran the event virtually on a course of their choice. The BBC's Joe Wilson has this report.
So began London's first autumn marathon. Covid changed everything and changed nothing. The course was laps of St James's Park, but still the same distance. This weather demanded more endurance than ever. Bridget Kosgei was streets ahead by the time the women's elite race finished.
She's beaten the course, she's beaten the rain, and she's beaten all of her rivals here.
But not a day for world records. A day for perseverance.
Very, very tough race because it rained all the way. Even our legs freezing.
By late morning, the elite men were doing their laps here, while the mass participation was happening everywhere. 45,000 doing their marathons wherever, however they could.
Lee and Ryan here, running for Children with Cancer UK.
The miles still mattered, the cash for charity still counted. In fact, maybe more than ever.
Alistair and his brother Bruce for Parkinson's.
and so to the greatest, the quickest. But Eliud Kipchoge had rivals at his sleeves. This was a race. He spoke later about a blocked ear. He is only human. But this was almost unthinkable. Kipchoge off the pace. It was definitely there for someone else to win, but who? The long stride of Vincent Kipchumba, and alongside him for Ethiopia Shura Kitata. After 26 miles, suddenly they were both Usain Bolt.
The two of them locked in battle, neck and neck, stride for stride. It's going to be Kitata who takes the victory. A great finish.
You measure this event in miles and emotion. Whoever you are, all you give is everything.
That report by the BBC's Joe Wilson. And finally, the Japanese founder of the Kenzo fashion brand has died at the age of 81 from Covid-19. Known for his colourful graphic and floral prints, Kenzo Takada was the first Japanese designer to gain prominence on the Paris fashion scene. He founded the internationally known brand under his first name in the 1970s and later launched a men's line and casual sportswear lines in the 1980s. And that's World Watch for today. I'm Max Toll. Kei a koe, Mani?
Thanks, Max. E koe na te purongo o te paututanga mō tēnei tā, Monday, October the 5th. Stay with RNZ. We'll bring you the Prime Minister's announcement on changes to Auckland's alert level at 1 o'clock. Big mihi to our producers Denise Garland, Daniel Gilhilly, Michael Kropp and our operator Cass Saunders today. Kei toki mai mātou a pōpō and join us tomorrow from the midday team. Kia pai tō koutou rā.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you all from Christchurch. Cabinet met via Zoom today to review Auckland's COVID-19 alert level. The Auckland cluster became New Zealand's biggest ever with 179 cases attached to it. However, it is one that all signs point to now being under control. There have been no new cases within that cluster for 10 days, only one case in the past 2 weeks, and only 5 people from the cluster are yet to recover. According to research undertaken by Te Punaha Matatini, there is now a 95% probability of the cluster being eliminated. A recent group of 6 cases linked to the border from a person who completed managed isolation and had a negative day 3 and day 12 tests has highlighted how cases can be rapidly identified, traced, tested and contained without any change to alert levels or the restrictions that go with that. It has now been 12 days since a confirmed case associated with this cluster, with only one person who still has the virus, and we are confident it too has been contained. Much was at stake with this resurgence of COVID. Second waves around the world have led to more deaths and illnesses and ongoing economic restrictions that have placed lives and livelihoods at risk. It was a test of our plan. Just as our team came together to deliver a world-leading response to the first wave of COVID, we did so again with the second. I know for many this one has felt harder, especially for Aucklanders. It was more fragmented with different parts of the country at different levels, and it felt longer and dragged on in what was already starting to feel like a very long year. But despite that, Aucklanders and New Zealanders stuck to the plan that has worked twice now and beat the virus again. Our team of 5 million, a little more battle-weary this time, did what national teams do so often. We put our heads down and we got on with it. You only have to look around the world to see the alternative to our approach here in New Zealand. Cases continue to surge, with the World Health Organization reporting almost 35 million cases and over 1 million deaths worldwide. The UK reported over 12,000 new cases on Saturday and has placed limits on gatherings of no more than 6 in order to halt their most recent spread. All workers who can work from home have been encouraged to do so through their winter, which takes them through to the end of the year and beyond. And that is the case in many other parts of Europe also. These measures have largely been absent in New Zealand for some weeks now. Even under Alert Level 3, the Treasury estimated economic activity was at 80 to 85% of what is usual, and in recent weeks at Level 2 have revised the number up to 90 to 94% of normal activity. We've seen the strength of our economy in recent weeks through jobs, exports, building consents and traffic updates. More than 9,000 filled jobs were added across the country in August. Our merchandise exports rose nearly 9% over the month, driven by our farmers and growers delivering dairy, kiwi fruit and meat to the world. Annual building consents remained near record highs in August, which means developers have the confidence to invest and get on with their work. Traffic movements and card spending analysed by the Treasury shows that when Auckland went to 2.5, activity in the rest of New Zealand and the Auckland region as a whole returned to what was previously seen under Level 1. However, I know that recent months have been challenging for many Auckland businesses, especially those in hospitality, retail, tourism and the arts. But when we quickly stamp this virus out, our economy is able to return close to normal quicker. The Oxford University COVID tracker continues to position us favourably compared to the likes of the US, UK, Australia, Japan and Canada when it comes to how stringent our restrictions are. At levels 2 and 1, New Zealand is one of the most open countries and economies in the world. We're one of the few where you can gather in any numbers you like, go to work with limited or no restrictions and watch sport in full stadiums, like we will this Sunday in the Bledisloe Cup opener. So, on the basis of the success and effectiveness of our elimination strategy, and on the advice of the Director-General of Health, Cabinet has confirmed that Auckland will join the rest of New Zealand at Alert Level 1 from 11:59 p.m. this Wednesday, the 7th of October. As we come together again as a country in Level 1, we can let ourselves once again feel pride that we managed to get to that position together. COVID will be with us for many months to come, but we should still mark these milestones. But as is ever, my responsibility is also to forewarn. Resurgence of the virus is not our only worry. Resurgence of complacency is right up there too. Daily use of the COVID Tracer app has halved from a peak of 2 million scans to 1 million in the past week. Given that there are 3.9 million New Zealanders aged over 18 years old, at most that means only a quarter is scanning every day. In real life, that complacency means that in the event of a future outbreak, we may not be able to contact you as quickly, get you tested or into isolation, and as a result, we could possibly see the virus spread further faster. At Level 1, it is still a requirement that businesses display the QR code, so please do keep checking in. The other area we can't become complacent on is testing. Recent modelling shows us that if we test 35% of people with COVID-like symptoms, then any new community outbreak would likely be a small one, limited to fewer than 50 cases. The low rates of testing back in July, when we were enjoying the freedoms of Level 1, could well have been part of the reason we didn't pick up the outbreak sooner. We all want to avoid more restrictions. Our public health systems are getting stronger all the time, but to stay at Level 1 relies on all of us continuing to be vigilant and playing our part. Whenever you are in New Zealand, keep using the app, scan in everywhere you go, and remind the people you are with to do the same. If you are even slightly unwell, stay home, ring Healthline and get a test. Avoiding another outbreak depends on each and every one of us, and we all have a role to play. Over the past couple of weeks, I've travelled the country. Everywhere I go, COVID is at the top of people's minds. Almost without exception, people are proud of our collective achievements in eliminating the virus. Grateful for the wage subsidy that has sustained jobs, and looking forward to the economic opportunities now available to us off the back of our COVID success. We are talking to Australia about the travel bubble, and we're looking to join this arrangement as soon as it proves itself safe to do so. My message to New Zealanders remains the same as it always has been, though. We are in a good position because we went hard and we went early. We have a plan to continue responding to COVID-19, and we will apply the same rigour to our economic recovery as we did to our world-leading health response. Every test of our plan, of our systems, makes us stronger, better, more resilient to a virus that will be with the world for some time to come. Happy to take your questions.
Consider having a special cabinet meeting on Friday so that you could move Auckland to level 1 today instead of having Wednesday?
No, at the time that Cabinet made that decision, it was about seeing through that additional cycle of the virus, which takes us through to Wednesday as well, but also, of course, about gazetting. So that wasn't, we didn't want to make that in-principle decision. We wanted, again, to have all that data. It also allowed us the benefit of having the 12-day test results from that more recent outbreak as well. Of course, the public transport orders relate to level 2. But what I would encourage people to consider is ongoing use of all of the tools that we've learned along the way that make a difference to people. So scanning QR codes. Please continue to scan into everywhere that you visit. If you're having a social gathering, make a note of the people that you are with. Wash your hands. And definitely, without question, stay home if you are sick and get a test. Those are the really critical measures at level 1. We do want to create a culture of people being willing to use masks, but we haven't got an order for them at level 1.
New Zealand has obviously been continuing to have masks, so is your expectation that they will just continue to do that and it's a decision for them?
Yes, absolutely a decision for them. You'll see that they've continued to do so through this more recent period where it's only been a requirement for travel in and out of Auckland, but absolutely a matter for them. I can see why they would make that decision. It, of course, adds to a bit of resilience in their network as well.
Is that encouraged by Dr. Ashley Blanfield, and what was the advice around that?
I would need to, well, for Air New Zealand specifically.
And just generally?
No, so the recommendation from the Director General was QR code use, testing, and staying home if you're sick. Those, and of course the public health messaging around washing hands. Those continue to be the primary focus, but particularly the testing. I can't put enough emphasis on that. We know from Flu Tracker that people are still experiencing cold and flu symptoms. We need those people to get tested. That helps us get in front of the virus and any potential spread of it. The sooner we can detect it in people, but we really require people to get tested. I don't want anyone to think because we're at level 1 that now means that COVID is absolutely absent from New Zealand. It means there's no sign of it currently, but we need to keep up that vigilance around testing.
Do you want to see no community cases in Australia for 28 days before Aussies can come?
Well, you see, actually, that's even the criteria that Queensland is using for opening up borders to New South Wales. So we're not alone in having that criteria. 28 days is obviously a bit of a benchmark that other countries use as well as New Zealand to demonstrate that it would be safe or have less risk. That's not the only thing we'll be looking for. You'll see over the weekend, a case reported of someone who travelled in on a trans-Tasman flight. They were coming from the UK, but we're on that leg of an Australian-New Zealand flight, and they've tested positive. It just demonstrates how important it is to have completely separate transit flights between Australia and New Zealand and other countries.
Given that Aucklanders obviously are living in and around managed isolation facilities, quarantining border workers in the community, should they be any more vigilant than the rest of New Zealand?
Those who are working at border, and particularly we of course have protocols for those who are working at the border. So maritime, there are strict protocols around those who are coming in from overseas and are on vessels that haven't been at sea for long periods of time. They are monitored by customs to make sure they're not coming off their vessels. So we do have very strict protocols in those high-risk areas. including for those who may come into contact with those who are from high-risk areas. But yes, there are extra things we ask of our staff at MIQ. For instance, even guidelines around when they return home and washing the clothes they've worn that day, contact with family members when they first come home. So those kinds of messages are specific to those workers.
The communities that they're living in, presumably they are at a high risk still, aren't they? They're the areas that people should be more worried about.
Well, again, for those workers, we apply extra rigour around, of course, PPE use, testing of those workers, and guidance around what they can do to keep themselves and their family members safe. And of course, the testing is part of that as well. But again, keeping in mind, this first outbreak, we have still not been able to ascertain its origin. Many countries who have had resurgence, and the likes of Germany, have not been able to ascertain its origin. Vietnam hasn't been able to ascertain. So from the small examples we've seen recently, the use of rubbish bins or a lift, you can see how easy it can be to come in contact, which is why general testing across the country, we are asking people to maintain that. Do not assume that anywhere that you, because you live outside of a centre, that we don't want you to be tested. We do.
How confident are you that there is no community transmission in New Zealand?
Well, the moments from the experts are saying 95% confidence, but again, with smaller clusters, it's sometimes harder to be able to model, but you can see high confidence, and that's the reason we're moving. We only do that when the experts and the evidence say we can have a level of confidence to move to level 1.
And do you think that at mass gatherings like the rugby, for example, do you think at those kinds of mass gatherings people should be wearing masks?
People should make choices for themselves on this. I do want to build a culture where we encourage people to look after one another and keep each other safe. And so while there isn't an order there in place, that people should feel free to take whatever precautions they think make them feel more comfortable being in large environments. We definitely want people scanning. We want people taking note of where they are sitting. We want people washing their hands. And we definitely do not want you to attend if you are unwell. These are your acts of public service now.
So you've been approached quite a lot on the campaign trail about how proud New Zealanders are of their response to COVID-19. We've heard a lot of people come up to you and thank you personally. Do you think that that feeling of pride is now linked to you, and how's that helping your campaign?
You'd have to ask members of the public that question rather than me. What I do think that we cannot take for granted that what we did in New Zealand is what anyone would have done or what any country would have done. We made choices as a government to adopt this plan, and New Zealanders supported it. That is what's made the difference. Frankly, I have seen positions, however, from the opposition that suggest to me that they may not have chosen that path. And so I would say that we shouldn't put our progress at risk, because borders, for instance, remain critical, and some of the proposals I've seen around the borders, frankly, I think would be risky.
What do you think about the 15-minute, I think it's the 15-minute antibody test that's been getting some publicity?
Yeah, so
that could be a game changer in containing future outbreaks or even easing
there has been progress around alternative testing methods, whether it's high turnaround time or ease of collection. So spit testing, for instance. Work is being done in New Zealand around alternative testing methods. Something really important to keep in mind, though, New Zealand is looking for the same sensitivity and reliability for new testing options that we currently have. Many countries are looking for a form of screening and surveillance. We require very sensitive testing because of our strategy. We can't afford to let one positive result through the net. And so that does mean that we've got a different standard than others might. Work has been done on whether or not we can get that level of sensitivity for some of the testing that's available. That's being done by ESR as we speak, particularly around spit testing.
You wouldn't really want that to replace the PSR?
It could well. We just need the same sensitivity as those testing. There's some calibration going on at the moment around the spit testing. So I expect it will be available in New Zealand, but we've got to make sure that it has the same reliability as what we're using at the moment. Particularly will be useful for the border testing. I consider myself agnostic, as many of you will know because I've spoken openly about it. I was raised in a religious household. I've always been proud of my upbringing, but I now consider myself agnostic.
Do you think that religion has been politicised during the election campaign?
I've never got into the habit of commenting on other people's personal beliefs, and I don't intend to start now.
Did you see the National Party's housing policy? What do you make of that?
Yes, I have seen it, and I think, frankly, it would take us back to the 1990s. And by that I mean I think it would take us back away from delivering housing for first home buyers, away from increasing public housing numbers. I mean, to suggest that as an answer to the housing troubles that New Zealand has experienced, that we should sell off state houses, I think is absolutely wrong.
What do you think of the idea of relaxing, or not relaxing, but broadening consenting requirements, flattening consenting requirements, allowing central government to open up consenting and opening up more land for residential property development? Do you think that would probably bring on more supply?
Well, first thing I would say is that, of course, we initiated significant work on the RMA when we came into government, recognising that work was required there. And that's now what you're seeing us talk about this election campaign. The second thing we've done is fast-track consenting as part of our COVID recovery and response. The third thing we're doing is seeing what we can do to speed up, particularly consenting for kāinga order for state housing. And we think that will make a difference too.
When in this city, bringing on extra land for housing development did actually have an incredible effect on flattening house price growth, which is something that you mentioned in the paper.
Supply.
Exactly, focusing on extra supply. Do you think that applying that precedent nationally could have a similar effect in cities like Auckland and Wellington, where you're seeing a similar house price growth to Christchurch?
Yeah, and look, this is our intent with RMA reform, to make it simpler, to make it less costly, but actually to still get, to ensure that we have the environmental protections that a community expects. So we are doing that work, and at the same time have made already inroads through fast-tracking consenting right now. I'll give you a chance to also speak to Minister Woods on that as well. You know, it is fair to say, of course, that state housing, this is often the last opportunity for housing. And so we have to be mindful of that, that often, we'll be dealing with situations where, for a range of reasons, this is the last housing option for people. At the same time, no one wants a negative effect for those living around an individual where there have been issues. And so our view is that has to be worked through and managed well. One of the things that we lost from the last government is often in state housing developments of large scale, we often had support networks within that community. I know a specific development in Auckland that used to have a permanent presence of someone there, and that was lost under the last government. That's the way to deal with those social issues, and that is something we've been reinstating. We've announced our dental policy. We do believe that for vulnerable New Zealanders in particular, that they weren't able to access dental health care, and that was causing much longer term costly health issues. So we've extended the grant that they're able to access. What we also want to do is improve the access of under 18-year-olds who already can access it for free but aren't.
These 18 to 25s and community card holders, that would be a preventative approach, wouldn't it? And it doesn't cost that much, so I would adopt that.
Well, I haven't seen the criteria for under what circumstances, of course, but from what you've described to me, our view is that by extending that grant access, many are only accessing the dentist, of course, when they're triggered by something. That grant access would enable them to get up to $1,000 worth of dental support. Look, on dental, I think we all want more accessible dental care in New Zealand. We do. But we also have to accept that we've inherited a health system where we have poor cancer care, where we've needed to increase access to drug funding. We have a number of issues with our hospitals. We have had to prioritise. We're making great inroads, but for dental it's been step by step.
Do you have any views or thoughts on the $8.7 billion fiscal gap that there seems to be in ACT's fiscal plan?
It doesn't strike me that it seems to be there. It strikes me that it is there. Look, when you're campaigning, you can't be cavalier. We are here in the middle of a campaign that will be about our economic recovery. And my pitch to New Zealanders is that we cannot afford to risk changing course right now, particularly when the two opposition parties in this campaign have $8 billion holes that they cannot account for. That to me says that their economic plans are risky.
With Labour's plan, Nationals highlighted the lack of full costing for pump hydro. You've obviously got the business case, but is it right to sort of bank the benefits of being 100% renewable, which is a Labour policy, without fully accounting for the cost or even estimate of what it may cost?
Look, on the 100% renewable, we have had a goal of moving towards 100% renewable for some time. We've brought forward that goal. We've said there are a number of means to get there. One has been potentially the Onslow project. Others have been smaller hydro projects. We're doing, and of course, we expect significant technological advancement that will help us reach that goal as well. We are now doing the work on which will take us there. I think National know full well what they're claiming here on what should be accounted for in the meantime is wrong, because on their logic, they have a significant hole in their own budget. Just last week, I saw posters advertising their commitment to the second harbour crossing. I see no accounting for that in their budget. Okay, Thomas, I'll finish with you, and then I'll check whether or not we've got oh, I'm sorry, I haven't scanned over to my right. Then I'll check whether or not there's any questions for the ministers I have with me. Otherwise, we've also got the stadium announcement.
It would just appear that the 100% renewable target would be almost impossible to reach without the Onslow project. And so if the business case comes back and says, look, it's prohibitively expensive or it actually can't be done, then you'd probably have to adjust that.
Nothing that we've done here is unusual. We have absolutely followed the usual accounting protocols for projects. No final decision has been taken, no costing has been undertaken, and so it would be highly unusual to bank a project that at this stage has none of that detail attached to it, nor any agreement as to whether or not that will be the project that takes us to that aspiration. So again, nothing unusual about what we've done in our fiscal plan, totally within the expectations of what Treasury would do. That is completely counter to what we've seen with National's plan, where there is a legitimate hole that we're yet to see accounted for. And then I'm going to come over here, if I may, Tova.
Do we effectively need to enact state of emergency type powers to solve the housing crisis?
You know, you've already seen us move, with pace, doubling transitional housing, rolling out that housing first for homelessness, looking at, and we already have fast-tracked RMA consenting that will enable projects to get underway as well. Doubling, as I said, transitional housing and an extra 8,000 public houses. We are treating housing with urgency. Compare that to the National Party, who are proposing that we sell state housing. Yes.
What do you make of Judith Collins saying it's craziness to allow people with 1 or 2% in the polls to enter Parliament when National stood aside and lets them so ACT can get in without meeting the 5% threshold?
Well, look, I'd have to say, to declare our democracy crazy, which essentially that seems to be a commentary around, I'd say is wrong. Look, political parties have the right to campaign. Voters decide whether they meet the threshold to enter Parliament. But again, this campaign, we haven't done deals. We've just got on with campaigning for Labour, and that's what I'm sticking with. I think I'm going to. Well, Labour's always had a position on that, and it remains the same. Okay, I'll bring up. Can I just gauge whether or not there's a desire to have Minister Robertson and Minister Woods? They won't take it personally. If you don't, no. Okay, we'll leave that to the next announcement. I'll call time now. Thank you. Last question. I feel this is not an example of how I parent, I should say.
Familiar with the BBC comedy Splitting Image and the fact that they have done, they've relaunched their series and have done a satirical piece on you.
Yes. Yes, I am familiar with the show. I have seen past pieces on it, of course, over a number of years. I understand it's been very popular in the UK. And so, yes, I've seen it.
What did you make of it?
I'm glad that I whipped Neve away from watching it just in time near the end there. Yep. I was surprised by the emphasis on the ginger crunch. All right, thank you, everyone. Did I hear, was there... Thank you.
Are you aware of the split of between who is actually paying for the
In terms of the number of invoices that we've issued, yes, that is something that I am getting reporting on. Of course, none of those invoices are actually at their end due date yet, because there was a 90-day payment period. We have had some payments coming through, and the correct number of invoices have been issued, but it's a 90-day payment period on those.
Are you happy with the number of people who are getting exemptions, compassionate exemptions on?
Oh, look, I mean, there is a clear process that's set up. They're assessed by officials on the merits of the case, and I have no reason to think that they're not being assessed according to each and every individual case. Thank you.
Sorry, this question's especially clear. Sorry, so the question?
The question is, what do you make of 8.7?
Look, as the Prime Minister's already said, opposition parties have now got each an $8 billion hole. They have to be able to put up a credible plan. They've failed to use the right numbers again. There's some very questionable assumptions in here. But what makes it even worse is that what underpins that are cuts in the basic public services that New Zealanders rely on. I mean, if you look at ACT's policy, it's got cuts to the winter energy payment and working for families and interest-free loans. And the only pathway that is possible for National is through ACT. And so both National and ACT have to take responsibility not only for the mistakes that they've made, but also for the cuts to public services that would be required.
And you've also highlighted problems with their proposal to cut PPF money. Is that right? That they would cut money that's already been spent?
It's very hard to tell, but they did put in a sum of money within there, I think close to $1 billion, and much of the PGF has been allocated, and presumably this is another example to go with Judith Collins's desire to change the law to take the wage subsidy back from people who legitimately used it. That kind of undermining of business confidence, I think, is taken very seriously by the business community.
Do you have a rough idea of where we are in terms of the money that's been paid out from the COVID funds and how much it's been paid out as opposed to allocated?
Yeah, so obviously in the pre-fu it took us up to the end of the financial year, and I think we're up to about 19 billion at that point. Clearly there's been more since that time as well. I mean, you've got examples of things like PPE, where that money is continually being paid out in ACT's numbers that presumably would somehow have to be clawed back. That's done on a monthly basis through the accounts, and I'd have to get you the latest numbers, Thomas. I don't have them with me.
Can I just ask you quickly on fast-tracking RMA, do you think that there's any scope for broadening how that is used, given how slow reform has and continues to be?
Well, obviously we've put it in place now, and we'll see how it goes, having just recently passed that legislation. Ultimately, the thing that we all want is to get the reform done so that we don't have to put stopgap measures in. Through this period of time, David Parker's led some excellent work. The Randerson report has given us a template that we're now committed to implementing, but we'll see how the fast tracking goes and whether or not there need to be any tweaks or extensions, potentially, but it's only just come in. Okay, everyone. Claire, anything from you? No.